Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of Cloud Deep Dive. In today's video, we will talk about Amazon Relational Database Service, which is also known as Amazon RDS. So what is Amazon RDS? Amazon RDS is a web service that make it easier for customers to set up, operate and scale their relational database service in the cloud. Most organizations were using database in their own data centers, and with on-prem kind of solution, they need to take care of their hardware and software installation. They need to take care of the configuration management and patching or any type of backup, and all those things they have to take it on their own. But if customer use RDS, like in this table is mentioned that everything scaling, high availability, database backup, software patching, install, you name the thing, everything is taken care by AWS. You don't need to do anything. It's kind of a managed service for you. And you just need to concentrate on your application optimization. So you don't need to worry about the database. Everything will be taken care by AWS and you just concentrate on your application. So in this video, I'm going to show you that how you can create a new RDS database, what are the different deployment types are involved in that, and we'll go through step by step what are the different options you have when you create a new database. Okay, so I have logged in into my console, and to go to the RDS, we'll go to the database and we'll select RDS. We'll click on create database, and under this you have two different options, standard create or easy create. With the easy create, RDS by default choose some of the options, default options, and it doesn't let you change these options when you create it. But if you want all the features enabled and you want to choose on your own, you can click on standard create. Under RDS you will have five different database types: Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle. Amazon Aurora also comes under RDS, but it has different architecture which we will cover in a different video. So suppose to create it, I want to choose PostgreSQL, and you can choose which version of PostgreSQL you want to use it. After that, you get a template that you want this database for your production workload, or you want it for your demo test, or you want just for the free tier. Based on which template you choose, your availability durability option might change. So suppose I'm going for the free tier, you may see that this you are not able to choose any of them, and it will be a single DB instance type. But if you go with the dev and test, you have different variety that you can choose any of this deployment type. And with the production as well, you have all the development types available. So if you are just doing for the learning purpose, then I would suggest you to go with the free tier, because that might not cost you that much. But if you are going with the demo test or production, that might charge you some money. Next, let's talk about deployment options. So we have single DB instance, single MultiAZ DB instance, and MultiAZ DB Cluster, which is the new deployment type launched by AWS recently. In case of single DB instance, like it name suggests you, that it will give you only one DB instance in one availability zone, and all the read and write will happen with that DB instance only. So if something happened to that particular database instance, RDS instance, your application will be impacted because there is no standby or no high availability provided by it. So if you're doing any development or testing, then yes, it's suggested that you use a single DB instance because you might not need that high availability. But if you're doing a production workload, then single DB instance is not a good choice for your workload. Next is multi-AZ DB instance. So like the name mentioned here, multi-AZ, that means that your DB instance is deployed in multiple availability zones. So let me show you the AWS documentation about multi-AZ DB instance deployment. Like in this diagram, it shows that in multi-AZ deployment, instance deployment, you will get two instances in two different availability zone. One will act as a primary DB instance and another one will act as a standby replica of that. So any read or write will happen to your primary DB instance, and all the write transactions will be sent back to your standby replica, and it will be a synchronous replication. That means that both the primary and standby will always be in sync with each other. In this you will get a CNAME. So this RDS instance will provide you CNAME which you can use in your application to connect to this RDS database. So in case anything happened to your primary instance, RDS will internally point the CNAME to a standby replica by promoting standby to primary, and your application doesn't need to make any changes because the CNAME will internally point it to your standby replica. Now there can be two type of failover can happen. One, where your standby replica failed. So in case your standby replica instance failed, what RDS or AWS will do that it will cut off this synchronous replication. It will bring up a new RDS replica in standby, and it will start the replication to it. But in case your primary DB instance goes down, then it will promote your standby replica and make it as a primary, and it will change the CNAME pointing to this standby replica so that all the read and write will start going here, bring up a new standby, and will start the replication between these two. Other thing about standby replica is that you cannot access this standby replica. So like it mentioned, no read access, so you cannot, it does not provide you a separate endpoint to access this standby replica. So it's just there to provide you the high availability. It does not provide you any other feature, like you cannot route your read queries to the standby replica to scale it. So you cannot do it. It's just providing you the high availability. So that's all about MultiAZ DB instance deployment. Next, let's go to our next one, the MultiAZ DB cluster. So for MultiAZ DB cluster, you will get one primary and two standby. And in this case, these standbys can be used for reading purpose. So these are your read replica, you can say. Like in MultiAZ DB instance type, your standby was standby and you were not able to read it from it. But in MultiAZ DB cluster, you can read it from these instances. And another thing is, like whenever you write anything to your writer instance, it will send those requests or write transactions to these DB instances. And if one of the instance says that I'm done with the writing, it will send back the acknowledgement to the main or primary DB instance, and it will consider that the write is complete and it will send the acknowledgement back to your application. So at a time, one of the DB instance will have your latest copy. Another, in case of failover, what will happen that it will promote one of these read replica as a primary DB instance, and it will check that which one has the latest copy of all the data. It will promote that as your writer DB instance or your primary DB instance, and behind the scene it will bring another reader instance and do the replication for that. Another thing is, like you will find or you will get different endpoints. One will be a cluster endpoint which you will use to perform any write queries. That can also be used for the read queries, but primarily it's used for your for writing any query to your DB instance. And another endpoint you will get it is reader endpoint. Reader endpoint you will use to read any data from the database, and it will use these two instances, whichever has the latest data, it will get data from these two. Third type of endpoint you will get is the instance endpoint. So for each instance, one for the writer and one each for the reader DB instance, you will get an instance endpoint which you can use to access this database. So that's all about MultiAZ DB cluster deployment. Let's go back to our screen, and these are the three deployment type. Based on your need, you can choose which one you want to use it. So after your deployment options, whatever you want to choose, you can choose that, and then you can define the DB cluster identifier, username, and if you want to specify your own password, you can do that. Otherwise, you can say auto generated password. Here you can define what type of instance you want, standard class or memory optimized. And if you go with the free tier, then you will get an option for your T3 instance type as well. Next, on the storage, you will have general purpose, magnetic, and provision. For this particular deployment, you have only option of provision, but if you go with the other free tier, then you might see general and magnetic as well. Allocated storage, how big the EBS volume you want for this RDS, what is the provisioned IOPS, and storage auto scaling is not enabled right now. But if you go, because this feature is not available for MultiAZ DB cluster, but if you go with the MultiAZ DB instance, then you can select this option as well. And the way this auto scaling work is, there are three main conditions which should meet before RDS instance will add more storage. One is like the available free available space should be 10% of the allocated storage. So suppose you have 200 GB hard disk, then 180 should be used, and if only 20 GB is left, then it will consider to add more storage. Another one is the low storage condition, like the 20 GB should remain for at least for 5 minutes. And there's another condition that in the last 6 hours there should not be any storage modification or storage optimization has completed on the instance. So either of these, whichever the longer duration is, based on that it will decide whether the auto scaling will work or not. And minimum maximum, basically here you have to specify that how much what is the threshold, what is the maximum storage this RDS can assign to your EBS volume. So each time it might increase maybe 10% or 20%, but there is a limit that it can go up to this certain limit. So that limit you can define here. Another is an activity where you can define all your VPC related information. Here one thing I want to point it out, the subnet group, that for this you have to create a subnet group. So for this VPC by default subnet group is created, but if you want to create a new subnet group, you can go here on the right hand side panel and you can select the subnet group, and you will be able to create a new subnet group from there. Similarly, parameter group and option group can also be created, which will be used later on while filling up this template. Authentication, there are 3 options based on your need. You can select one. In additional configuration, all other things are basic and self-explanatory. The one thing I just want to point out in the backups, so you can enable the automated backups, and one of the need you will require to do it if you are creating some read replica. And read replica I will be covering in a separate video, but if you need to create a read replica, then one of the basic requirement is that you should have the automatic backups enabled, and the retention period should be more than 0. So if you don't have, then it won't allow you to create an automatic backup, read replica. So for that you need to create one. Other few options are self-explanatory. You can go ahead, and if you have any question, let me know. I'll be happy to answer those. And after selecting details or options for your RDS instance, you can click on create database. So that's how you create this database. Next I'll show you one of the database which I created and how it looks like, what are the endpoints and all those things. Okay, so I have created 2 different RDS instances. One is MultiAZ DB instance and one is MultiAZ DB cluster. So if I go to MultiAZ DB cluster 1, so like I mentioned, it will create 1 writer and 2 reader instances. And for DB cluster you will get 2 endpoints. One is your writer instance endpoint and one is your reader instance endpoint, and individual instance will also have their own endpoints. They all are in different availability zone, like you see here 1D, 1F and 1A. Under configuration you will find some other basic information, and if there is a recommendation about this DB cluster, that will be displayed here. Next, if I go to the DB instance one, you will see only one endpoint here. You won't see multiple DB instances. You will see only one that is deployed in US East 1D. Under configuration, if you go, you will see that it's a MultiAZ, select as yes, and my secondary instance is in US 1A, which is my standby, and that you won't find any other endpoint for your standby instance, because you cannot connect to it directly. This is the only endpoint by using which you can connect to this database. Under the recommendation you will see, because I turned off enhanced monitoring for this, so it's advising me that there's a recommendation that you should enable your enhanced monitoring. So any recommendation AWS will provide will be displayed here. Another thing I wanted to mention, that when you create the database, in the starting you will see the MultiAZ as no, and the reason for that is whenever you create a database, what it does, that it create the database and then modify it to convert it into MultiAZ, and at that time it will start creating your standby in a different availability zone. So until it's done, you will see that MultiAZ is no, and once that standby replica is created, you will see MultiAZ is yes, and you will see the secondary zone as well. So that's all about RDS DB instances, about different deployment type, how they look it, and how what are the different endpoints it will generate. So hope you like the video, you learned something new today. Please let me know if you have any question, and feel free to put it in the comment section. We'll be happy to answer. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you. Bye.